Hey friends. Um, so as we move from cross of planning to cross of sleeping phoenix, which is an idea from human design, if you don't resonate from human design, don't worry about it. It basically means we previously have been operating for the past I don't know, 700 years on the construct of like external authorities are where we orient to for safety. So, like, if someone says that I'm doing a good job, then I can feel safe. If someone says that I'm okay, then I can feel okay. And we're shifting from that over to I am a source to self and I don't need to check in with an external authority. So, there's all sorts of things that fall under um, that like all sorts of behaviors that work better according to those two systems. So in a system where it's all about safety comes from an external authority, um, people pleasing is really helpful. Following rules is really helpful. Negotiating or demanding or using aggressive or passive aggressive communication is really helpful. Um, Helpful meaning it keeps you safer, right? So I'm getting away from using the words healthy and unhealthy because they don't really tell us about what the nervous system is doing. Okay. So that's why, like, you could know somebody who's a health fanatic, like they exercise like all of the time and they eat only spinach or something. And they're like so sick and they have like a lot of health problems, right? Or they're just like depressed and anxious. So, healthy or not healthy are not really helpful words, but safe or not safe can be really helpful words because the nervous system doesn't really care about um, success in the typical way that we describe it, like being having a fancy job or like a million followers or um, even a ton of money or a perfect relationship or whatever. And we can tell this because when we look at celebrities, they often have like really poor mental or physical health, right? So, safety and danger are helpful to understand like behavior. Okay. So, for the most safety in a construct that's oriented around external authority, it's safest to have behaviors that are really codependent, is a nice catch all. Okay. A lot of negotiating, a lot of manipulating, a lot of people pleasing, a lot of perfectionism, a lot of like passive aggressive and aggressive. Those are all really helpful for when there's an external authority. Hard work. Um, as we shift into Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, which is more about having an internal sense of authority, um, becoming a source to self, uh, those behaviors become less helpful. The safety is not derived from pleasing an external authority. And we're seeing this already in the way that, like, you could be a really good employee for 30 years and then get fired, like, unceremoniously and not have any support from that company. Or you could work really hard in school and get straight A's and then graduate with a bunch of debt and not be able to find a job, right? So already we're seeing that it is not so safe anymore to use those codependent behaviors that we learned from the cross of planning construct. It's just not creating safety in the same way that it used to. And that's morally neutral. That's why I also like using the words of safety versus danger because it just helps us to see that those behaviors were helpful before. A lot of us learned those behaviors because they kept us safer. And it was a good idea to use them then because they did work. They helped us to live more, to survive. And happiness is not a part of safety versus danger. It's like, happiness wealth, all that stuff. It's not, the nervous system's not wired to make us happy. The nervous system is wired to make us safe. So as we transition, people are realizing like these old strategies are not as effective at creating safety as they used to be. So, what are the strategies that are more effective for creating safety in a more in a construct where being a source to self or having being an authority to self is more helpful? Hold on, my battery is dying, and I didn't even know that this wasn't plugged in. That so rarely happens, but I just moved my desk. You may be able to tell that things are a little different in here. I guess it got unplugged. There we go. Okay. So, what are the strategies that help promote safety in Cross of Sleeping Phoenix or in a construct that's oriented to being a source to self? So instead of passive aggressive or aggressive communication, assertive communication is the most helpful here. Instead of manipulation and coercion, uh, clear boundaries are helpful. So a lot of people trying to like get out of codependency tried to understand this concept of boundaries as like telling other people what they can or cannot do. But boundaries are never about other people. If you've been to any 12 step, you will have heard like the serenity prayer. Um, Dear God, like grant me the serenity to what is it? I have it on the wall. Accept the things I cannot change, change the things, have the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to change the things I can. No, the courage to change the things I can. Sorry. The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And for the first 5 years of when I was in Al-Anon, I was like, okay, I just have to have more courage so I can change more things. But the if you can't change something, it's probably because it's outside of yourself. So 12 step actually teaches like the things you can change are me, myself, and I. The things I cannot change are people, places, and things. So it would be helpful if that was included in the serenity prayer because I think a lot of people take it the wrong way. But it's grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Grant me the serenity to accept that I cannot change people, places, or things. Grant me the courage to change myself and grant me the wisdom to like constantly come back to reminding myself like, oh, am I trying to change people, places, or things? Let me let that go. Am I trying to change myself? Like, great. Can I have more courage and willingness? So when it comes to boundaries, they are always and only about my behavior. Okay. So if someone else is doing something that I don't like, I can ask them if they'd be willing to change it, right? So I go to Burger King and I say, can I please have a hamburger with no ketchup? Okay. I can ask. I get the hamburger, it has ketchup. I can go back to the cashier and I can say, hey, I asked for no ketchup. Would you mind making me another one that doesn't have ketchup? The second time it comes back with ketchup again, right? So at that moment, I get to decide like, what is a better use of my energy? Do I want to keep asking this person to not put ketchup on? Or does it seem like that's not in their wheelhouse today? Like, for whatever reason, this individual is like struggling to not put ketchup on my hamburger. So I can either just be like, great, I'll scrape out the ketchup. It's no worries. Or like, I'm allergic to ketchup. So like, I'm going to just ask for a refund today. Can I just have my money back? And then if they like give me hell about that, I might be like, looks like Burger King is not in the cards for today, right? I drive down the street to Taki. Okay. Taki is what my family calls Taco Bell. um, okay, so in that moment, I'm not going to be like, I set a fucking boundary that you not put the ketchup on my hamburger and I'm going to stay here until you don't put ketchup on my hamburger, right? And I could use a whole bunch of energy and get totally stressed and like wind myself into knots. I could start a public protest. I could put a like social media campaign that's like, they put ketchup on my hamburger. This is so wrong. This is so evil. Like, let's protest the Burger King. I could make my whole life about the fact that Burger King did not respect my boundary of not putting ketchup on my hamburger. But in terms of life energy and in terms of nervous system, like that is not to my benefit. Okay. In DBT, they say, would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? And effective does not mean winning. Okay. That's confusing too. Effective does not mean getting your way. Effective means I maintain my sanity, my sense of self. I'm able to care for myself. I'm able to find enjoyment in life. I'm able to connect with safety. I'm able to create a really meaningful, fulfilling life worth living. So if I was in that instance with the Burger King, right, depending on my nervous system state, I might get a little fiery about it. I might get like, what the hell? I just want a hamburger with no ketchup on it, right? And eventually, even if it's not in the moment, I may be able to be like, you know what? It would have been just fine to be like, never mind, friends. Just give me my money back, or like I'm gonna head down the street to Taki. Like this $5 is not in the scheme of things really helpful or worrisome to freak out about. So the question like becomes between the cross of planning, like I have to do everything that the rules say I have to do, and the cross of sleeping phoenix, like I get to do whatever is right for me, um, which some people misinterpret to be I don't have to ever do anything that I don't want to do, which is not what it is. But that side of things, like I never do anything unless I want it, that's also not helpful. That's as much of a trap as I always do everything I have to do, even if I don't want to. Either of those are traps. You can bet if you're on one end of an extreme is probably not helpful, okay? But what can be helpful with Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, which it's offering us, is this idea of like, how about being effective instead of being right? So like, is this worth it to me? Okay. So, like, is it worth it to me to start a national campaign against Burger King because they put ketchup on my hamburger? Today, it is not. It might be at some other point. Today, I'm like, you know what? I'd love to use my life force for something else. So I'm going to go get myself something yummy to eat somewhere else, and I am going to bless that Burger King and send them on their way, right? So in that way, the boundary always becomes about you. So your boundary in that moment of the Burger King would be when things don't go my way, I make a decision about whether I'd like to let it go or not. Not, I hate it when things don't go my way and I fight tooth and nail to prove that I had the right to not have hamburger or ketchup on my hamburger. Okay. So if it's somebody else's behavior, okay, like let's say my friend doesn't text me back. So I could say, hey, I don't want to be friends anymore unless you text me back. That's a demand, right? Or a threat. It's it also has that like negotiation quality. If I say like, if you text me back, I will keep being your friend. That's a negotiation or like a barter or a deal or a contract, right? Like, I will be married to you if you don't sleep with other people. That's also like, that's a controlling someone else's behavior, right? So, what are some versions of those types of scenarios where it's about our behavior and we're not trying to control somebody else, but we still take care to keep ourselves in situations that feel right for us, okay? So, I may be a person that I'm like, I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't, or someone who has sex with other people. Okay. So I would then say to myself, like, oh, hey, looks like this friend is having sex with other people. So do you want to keep that rule? Like, does that still feel right to you that you'd like to let them know, like, hey, would you please not sleep with other people? And then if they're like, actually, I really want to sleep with other people, then I get to be like, oh, okay, perfect. I'd rather not stay in this relationship then. And like, I wish you all the best, right? And maybe you're going to have some grief around losing that relationship, but then you're doing it because it's worth it to you. Like it's more worth it for me to not have this relationship than it is for me to be in the relationship when the person is having sex with other people. You're taking all of the right wrong out of it, right? The right wrong, like you did me wrong or like I did something wrong, that's what causes us all of the anguish, right? The like rules and who followed them and if it was good or bad or otherwise, that's where we have all of the suffering, right? If I'm like, oh, like this has been so great and I really love you and I'm gonna miss you. But like, I just feel like it's not worth it for me to be sleeping with someone who's sleeping with other people because I just have feelings about it that come up that doesn't feel safe in my body, right? Um, then you get to bless them and you get to free yourself to go do something that feels good in your body, right? And there's also like an interplay there with scarcity because you may have parts that come up and are like, oh, this is the last person on earth who's gonna love me or be available for me, so I should take what I don't want in order to not have anything. So I'm not saying that it's going to be like super that like lackadaisical, but you can then go do your therapy or your self inquiry around like, it seems like I have a belief that there's only one person on the planet for me. I'd like to work on that. It seems like I have the belief that it's better to take something that doesn't work for you than to lose something and have the possibility of not having a relationship again. I'd like to work on that. Right. So the nervous system stuff, if it's like stressful, if you're like in distress, then it's just telling you like, hey, you have a belief that you're pushing up against. So you can go work on that belief, right? Or like if I have a friend who never texts me back, I get to decide like, hey, is there a reason why you're not texting me back? And if they're like, nope, no reason, I just don't text that much. Then I'm like, oh, okay. And I get to decide like, do I want to keep texting that person? Is it okay with me? Is it like can I manage that if they don't text me back? If I have so much stress about it, then again, I could go to therapy and be like, seems like I have a belief that people should text me back. I'd like to work on that because nobody should text you back. Why? You know, there's like obligation is cross planning. Obligation is there's external authority determining your safety. Obligation doesn't have anything to do, like if we have two rabbits in the yard, they're so cute. If one rabbit's like, you don't talk to me in the morning, the other rabbit's just gonna be like, okay. Like obligation was helpful when people's survival was dependent on it. Like if I was assigned female at birth 700 years ago and my significant other like just left, then I would be screwed. I would have no access to money or resources. I would die like alone and my children would die too, right? So obligation was good in cross planning. But now we don't need that. This is like a rare circumstance. I mean, obviously, in lots of the world, women are still in that circumstance. But for those of us who are not, we don't need obligation anymore. You need obligation if your survival is dependent on it. Our survival is not dependent on that anymore. You can be a single woman. You can, have kids and no job and you can get housing for free. Um, it's not super, super fancy, but you can survive. It's not a survival threat anymore. And you might have emotional angst, but you can go get support around that, right? You can go do your therapy yourself and create the work of Byron Katie, whatever works for you. Okay, so all of that to say, like all of these strategies that were super helpful for survival in cross-up planning are no longer helpful for survival in cross of sleeping Phoenix. So give yourself the opportunity to look at how you're interacting with other people and offer yourself that reflection like, am I trying to control or change people, places, or things? And if so, is that worth it to me, knowing that's an impossible thing? And ultimately, even though it's like, even if it might be possible sometimes if someone's still willing to be manipulated, it is disrespectful ultimately because you're lying to someone and you're putting them in a contract, right? You're saying you're doing conditional love. So it's disrespectful. So take any behavior if you're feeling like relationships are getting wonky, take any behavior that you're doing in a relationship and think about, am I trying to manipulate, negotiate, demand, threaten, control, help, save, keep safe somebody else? If so, I might want to take a step back and ask myself, like, do I believe that they have autonomy and the right to their life? And do I want that for myself? And if so, how can I come back to my behavior? If all else fails, if you're feeling stressed, just ask yourself, like, okay, what do I need to do for me? If you're feeling stressed about someone else, be like, how can I take care of me? Because taking care of them is not your job. Okay. Also, there's a great book that highlights this pretty like straightforwardly. It's called Let Them by Mel Robbins. And it's like other people's business is their business. Also, Byron Katie, all of her stuff is other people's business, God's business, which is like weather and the functioning of your body, and then your own business is just your thinking and beliefs. Okay, I love you, love you.